Good afternoon, traders. This is Christian from Extravagant Trade Group, and this is your end of week video, market video for Friday, November 12th. Pretty eventful week, I would say. In terms of the price action, I guess being some events, and it was an exciting week to trade this week. So here's the week's performance. I will go over a little bit of that. In a few minutes, but I wanted to get to today's price action first. Of course, risk disclaimer in front of you. Please make sure you go through and read that. Everything that we're going through here is for education purposes only, not giving out any advice or recommendations. And if the screen's a little bit blurry, just give it a little bit more time because YouTube takes a while to render the high definition version of the video. So, theme of the day, a little bit similar to yesterday, and I kind of left that up from yesterday. A couple things kind of stood out to me the last couple days. Remember, going into, let's say, yesterday, we saw the VIX rise when the S&P was basically, flat to going up. So to me, that was a bit of a warning signal. We went over that day by day in these videos over the past week. And as well as in the trading room, we just talked about that didn't look right? That didn't smell right in terms of, seeing the VIX going up while the S&P was also going up too. So, that led us to a little bit of a pullback, which I think overall, these pullbacks after the market gets stretched. We talked about how the relative strength index RSI was about a 75, 76 in the S&P, which indicated overbought territory, and when that happens, usually some type of a little bit of a stall or digestion pullback. Usually, you get something like that. So we got a little bit of that, on Wednesday, and we didn't get much more of that, and I was actually, I'll tell you, I was surprised. I unwound a few positions, actually a decent amount of positions. Mentioning that, hey, the level that I was watching in the S&P was breached, and I kind of said when that happened, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw more volatility, but we didn't. We didn't see that, and just to kind of summarize yesterday and today's price action, the VIX was down, almost 8% today, ducked back down, almost below 16. So I think it settled in around like 1630 today. But remember where that was. I think we got to 19 this week. I also said if we got close to that 20 level, was going to be an issue for me, and I would have to take off some positions. So yes, I followed everything that I said I was going to do. Does that mean that my performance was perfect this week? No, it wasn't. But a couple other things that I said too this week was that, well, first of all, not only was the VIX the VIX down, but also we saw good breadth. Right. So that was one of the things at the beginning of the day. We saw this volatility in the first 10, 15 minutes. You started to see the S&P sell off. And I said, well, hold on a second. The breadth didn't really get that negative. So it kind of just, I kind of ignored it a little bit this morning. Right. Here's what I'm referring to. Right. The first 15 minutes of the day, the market was bid up going into the open, and there were some profit takers on that. Right. And we held. Right. So we held the bottom of value. And I always will change my mind based on what the price is doing and some of the indicators that I follow. But there wasn't really a need to change my mind. Right? Here's what the breadth was. Let's see if I can bring this in here. Right? Here's how we finished the day. That's our market breadth indicator. But that was showing green this morning too, even when the market looked a little dicey. And I just said, hey, let's give it a minute. Because I saw some traders just posting, hey, the VIX is ramping up here. I think the VIX was basically the high of the day, got to about 1730, and then we had some really nice price action after that, and I think there may have been some buy programs that kind of hit, and washed through, but really ended up being a nice trading day, and you kind of just had to sit on your hands there a little bit in the beginning of the day. The other thing that I said was in relation to the overall market was, I said if you had a bad day on Wednesday, I said, hey, it's only the 10th of the month, right? So I get more upset when we're at the end of the month, because I show my performance every month. I post it on Twitter, I post it to all the members. So I hate when we kind of end the month and rough of as we've done a couple months this year, or a few months this year. But I'm like, hey, it's only the 10th of the month. There's plenty of time to kind of, if you had a really rough day on Wednesday, it's part of the process, right? Like me selling positions, selling some positions, at the worst time, a couple of them I put right back on, so it's not a big deal when that happens. So I'm kind of pretty pleased the way that this week worked, because I was expecting volatility last week, right? I thought that it's been tough to stay in this market when it gets really overbought, and that's kind of what we got. And yeah, I mean, I reduced some risk in the middle of last week. And it's tough because this market just can kind of just continue to grind higher. But like I said, I think that we were due for something. Let's look at where the S&P is now. The level that you heard me talk about a couple times this week, probably a few times this week, was this 4664. So we got above that, and we're basically back to where we started the week, right? It looks like the value area for next week, we'll see what happens in terms of this pivot area. I'm not going to make a prediction, but I would watch this. I would watch right where we closed. 4682 is going to be the new value area for next week, right? And the other observations that you can make is we got back above the 5-period moving average, right? Which tells me that for now we're back above the short-term trend. Right, I talk a lot about that in these videos, right? The 5-period moving average. So, I think that's pretty good. I think that's enough to kind of talk about the major averages. The Q's outperformed. We can just glance at these really quick. That's also above the 5-day moving average. I tell you, I didn't even really look at that too much today. Small caps really weren't it for didn't perform that. They were not the standout. They were the standout a couple days. Somewhere that but I was going to say a couple of days this week. I don't actually. Maybe it was just one day this week which was yesterday, that the small caps outperformed. But they finished fine, positive for the session. Not all that bad. In terms of sectors, I like to kind of just brush through this really quick. The pot stocks were really strong this week, up 6% today. So they had some follow through, and for the week, they were one of the best performing sectors for the week. They were up about 11% for the week. So really strong out of that group. And, this has not been a group for me because I'm a trend trader. I trade things that are above the 200-day moving average. But I do trade some things if they are way, way below the 200-day moving average, like the pot stocks are, most of them. If you get above the 20 and the 50-day moving average, at least you have a short-term trend line to kind of go from. So we could touch upon those. Again, that's not usually where I set up camp to do my trading with underperformers of the market. But hey, some of these underperformers are coming up fast, from the lows. Blockchain stocks, they added another 1.8%. The FANG names were very strong today. I thought that was interesting. Amazon, which was really weak yesterday, came back, and I'm not really sure what to think of Amazon in here. So, again, you don't have to figure if every chart or every name that you go through, if it's not jumping off the page to you, then you just move on. There's so many other stocks to deal with, but it held where it needed to. But it didn't get it. It got very close to that upside target that I was looking for. If you look at the weekly chart in Amazon, right, it closed basically back at that top of value. So, Doji right on the top of value, which is a level that I talked about, I think, last week, that we closed right at the top of value. So this is tough, So I don't know if it's going to be one of my favorite plays going forward. I will continue to monitor it. I'll tell you what I thought looked really good today was Google. Right, Google made the turn, after having a couple red days. Remember, had a good earnings reaction, and I think buying dips in this is not bad. I added a little bit of a trade today for next week. Just a small call spread just to have some exposure. I actually did that in here, and it went through the upper strike. So, I took a target in it and kind of moved on. A lot of people seem to be looking at Facebook. I just saw Helene Meisler post, possibly an inverted head and shoulders in Facebook. I think a very easy level to watch will be that 50-day moving average, right where I've got the cursor. That will be a nice area, and perhaps that is a neckline, right? So that's something to watch, right? The meta stock. So let me talk about a couple other movers that I thought were really interesting. So just like in yesterday's video, talking about groups that really I thought were interesting, even though the market was going sideways. But a couple names that I thought were really pretty strong for the day was the software names and a lot of the recent earnings names. So for instance, you heard me talk about this as we started earnings season. I said we're going to find some new market leaders for the rest of the quarter. Right, and look at some of the names, that we're kind of finding here. Like, Roadblocks was not a name that I thought going into the earnings season that was going to be really strong, but this was good, and I went long Roadblocks yesterday. I think I talked about that at the end of yesterday's video. So I got rewarded for that. I did tone down the position yesterday because, again, I don't have a crystal ball, right? We don't know what this market's going to do, but, I put this trade on yesterday, and it just wasn't doing anything, and I didn't want to be super long. I added to it at 90, right around the same price, 98.94. But I took some off at the end of the day, but still, 104. Where'd this thing get up to? 107. I took the final one, I think, at 105. So I lost out on some of the last move at the end of the day, but still, for one day move, I'm very, very happy with that. TTD was another name too, where this is just by doing research, by doing your research at the end of the day and putting together a watch list. But look at the move in the trade desk, right? So again, kind of crazy because the day after earnings for Roadblocks and for TTD saw just a huge amount of call buying, and then the names, especially you go back to this Roadblocks, threw some people for a loop, right? But it never gave back it didn't lose the 5-period moving average. But again, very difficult when they buy as many calls as they did the first day, and the stock gives a lot of that move back. It gave back, but the whole move except for the gap, right? So not exactly easy, I would say. Right, TTD. I went right into this trade this morning. We saw calls, and to me, I remember that we saw those calls earlier in the week, and once they started buying again, I said I'm going after this thing today. So 95 for this one. This one closed at 100, and again, I didn't sit in it for that long. I think I took my last piece at 100. Was it TTD? Oh, I'm still holding on to that. Yeah, I still have a small piece of TTD. Not that big. Yeah, so it did close over 100, and I am holding. Then that's what I should be doing. By the way, is holding a winner. Holding the last piece of the winner. Right. All right, so that's a couple of them. Another one that reported earnings last week that held up very well is DOCN. Right, I mean, monster move, up 8.5%. Sentinel was not one that had exceptional earnings, but has just been acting very well. That name finished up 4.3% for the day. Airbnb I thought was kind of sneaky. Was kind of weak yesterday. Closed weak. I think this was the last hour of the day, which again, this market, like it's kind of giving you some curveballs here and there, right? It's not the best way to close. Like that didn't tell me to jump into Airbnb at the end of the day, but it did have good earnings, and to me it makes sense. Well, for it to return to the day after earnings. How could I forget Unity Software? But I mean, talk about a name that has just been on fire. Right, we caught that one on earnings day, but it has just continued to trend. And again, that's a perfect example. Take a look at the volume, right, after they reported earnings. Now, again, they ran into the number a little bit because of the everybody talking about the metaverse, but this is called accumulation that you see this, and this is textbook on earnings that when a name does well on earnings and it has nice price reaction, you will oftentimes see either institutions. I guess it doesn't matter. I was on Benzinga earlier, and they were saying, "Oh, it doesn't matter about if it's institutional or not." Institutions are obviously bigger and they can push around this market, but retail investors matter too. And so you could see the volume in here indicates that probably some funds were under positioned in this thing and have to go and buy after strong earnings, right? They do their assessment and then they often say, hey, I don't have a position in this, or I have a small position. I want to start buying this thing. So that happens over and over, and that's the most interesting part of earnings season to me. A couple other names too that I'm watching for next week. Asan, right? This name has been consolidating for about 3 weeks now. It had a little bit of a false move earlier in the week. That was tricky, I admit, but you got a nice green bar here, and that looks good. Net is another one. We added a position here at the end of the day. It's this is a high flyer, so you have to watch your position size, in my opinion. But it held very nicely when there was volatility this week. Perfectly held the value area for the month. So for me, that's enough for me to try a trade when I see something like that. Another one that I'm watching for next week, right? And again, if you go back at that Roadblocks chart or the TTD, some of them they consolidated for Airbnb. They consolidated for a couple of days. Nothing wrong with AppLovin consolidating a little bit, right? So I think that's definitely one to watch for next week. Let me just go over back to the trade blotter just to kind of talk about a couple other trades. This INMD has been working very well for me. I keep taking profits in the beginning of the day. I've done that, I think, 4 days in a row. I take profits in the beginning of the day. At some point in the day, I add back if the name dips a little bit. And it's been working really well to be able to kind of take that off. And and that's the beauty of taking targets, by the way, right? Is if you take targets, you're leaving yourself that flexibility that if a name does this, right, you could keep taking some off for profits, letting it settle back in, especially like it for the option positions, because option prices kind of go nuts in the first 20 minutes. So you take some profits, not be super greedy. And you could see, for example, right, I'm not taking in this INMD, right? I'm not waiting to make this a double, but if I could do this every day, where I add somewhere around 750, take it off for 850 or 950, right? And you keep doing that, that's 10-20%. That's really good by in my opinion, doing that for 3 or 4 days in a row. Now again, this has kind of been a perfect situation. ATKR, I took some profits in the beginning of the day for this one. Fortune Brands. Right, I like this group, kind of what it's doing, but I was hesitant to take this position the other day. If I talked about this in one of the videos a few days ago, because you had our version point of control up here. But once I saw that we were able to kind of get close to getting back over this, I took a position in this and took a couple targets in it. MAS was another name that I thought just set up really well. Masco, right, nice move in this thing. To get out of that bull flag. So I saw some calls in that, and it just was a no-brainer to me. Alcoa, this one again, I kind of hesitated the other day because it stopped right at the top of value, but now you got your close above value. So again, I didn't do anything crazy with that one, but started a position just to participate. All right, and SHW, a stock that nobody really talks about. But this is Sherwin-Williams. Take a look at the relative strength in this name. No pullback at all this week. Right, just continued to kind of motor higher. That was one name that I did look at, and I said, hey, this thing looks fine. There's no reason for me to take it off. And this name has made a real nice move from 316 up to 331, and I'm still long that name. Shopify, in addition to TTD, Shopify, I mean, monster move. I had a call spread on that I put on, I think, either the beginning of this week or last week, and it kind of just fizzled, right? I thought that the position was not going to work, and isn't it fun when you put on an option position and you kind of leave it for the garbage bin and it comes back? I mean, you had a 12% move in Shopify today. Look at the volume on Shopify. So both, I kind of group Shopify and TTD together. But man, they made some kind of a monster move. That could be one of the biggest candles ever for Shopify? You know, and I don't think on any major news either. It may have been added to. I saw that it may have been added to the MSCI index, or that it's going to be added to the MSCI index. So I didn't have to take this off for 650, considering that it's up another $70 from there, or $80. But I had the target out and I took it. So because if not, you have to hold the whole thing through next week. Car. Right, there's a position I think we talked about in yesterday's video. Nice little cute retest here. It had me a little bit worried intraday, but notice it closed above value and was very, very strong. All right, here's a little update that I updated position sheet. So I think that's enough charts to go through, but certainly another one that is catching my eye too, which has been very strong, is another one that nobody talks about, CALX. Right, Calix just continues to trend very, very well. All right, guys, we'll end the video just about here. I mentioned I would go over performance. Someone asked me to go over XLY. XLY has such a big portion of Tesla, which we could go over the Tesla chart. We already went over Amazon, but Tesla and Amazon make up such a big portion of this, right? But it is sitting in the 20-day moving average. A couple other charts that stood out to me in the sectors. So I would watch the 20-day moving average with consumer discretionary. And then, of course, you kind of have to keep an eye on Tesla. But I thought the materials chart, right? Again, nobody talking too much about the materials breaking out like this, but very strong. And I mentioned the home builders too. And that's kind of why I decided to pick. I didn't go long a home builder. But I went long a couple names that are kind of involved in that process. I'm long the Sherwin-Williams, FBHS, and Masco, right? They're kind of some building products, building material companies. I mentioned I would go over the Tesla chart too. So you got a level for next week, right? Someone asked me too, where would I go long Tesla? Well, I never know the answer to that question, but I will tell you this. Because there's no confirmation, the stock's down 2.8%. I like to wait for a little bit of confirmation, but you do have a level to trade against, right? So this is how it would go, right? If I were to take a trade in Tesla today on that dip, I would have a stop of 1024, right? And if it breaks 1024, I would be out of it, right? But if you want to buy the dip, which is name's not really dipping, but the name has come off the highs. It hit 1243, right? We know that Elon's selling. He's probably going to be done in a couple days. He sold 2 days ago. He sold yesterday too. So I think it would be a name to watch in here. Let's see what the weekly chart, right? So again, this has had a parabolic move. So I think if it holds here and consolidates for a little bit, I think it will set up possibly some nice trading opportunities going forward. But first things first is it's got to hold 1024. All right, a couple things to watch for next week. Like I said, I'd bring up the performance. Pot stocks, Chinese internet names. We went over that chart yesterday's video. Solar names were up 4%. Again, this is the week's performance. So the overall indices were down a little bit this week, but overall not down that much. This should be in red, by the way. There we go. And gold was up 2.7%. That stood out. to me, and that was after the inflation data mostly rallied, but it was actually rallying a bit before that. But I think had its biggest day. So yeah, for next week, a couple things. We've got option expiration. Those can be kind of dicey weeks that we've seen. Not every month, but we've seen certainly a handful of months that it's been dicey. Hopefully we're going to hear about who the next Fed chairman is. Fed Chair Powell, is Fed Chair Powell going to be the scapegoat for the reason for the inflation? Wouldn't surprise me, right? But again, that's kind of outside of trading. Maybe the market might move a little bit if there's a new Fed chair that's announced. So we'll see. We could have some interesting price action in store for us, and I think that's why it's important is to still have somewhat of a cash balance. It's kind of threading a needle with exposure, right? There's some really good looking setups like I went over in this video. I've certainly have a handful of positions on in my trading account, but I also have a cash balance too, just in case we do hear something, just in case there's some volatility next week because of monthly option expiration, or there's something else unknown that comes out. All right, guys, that's it for the video. Have a great weekend, everybody, and I will see you members. We'll get the normal amount of videos from me this weekend. Right? I do a lot of my homework. If you're not a member of Tribeca Trade Group, you can go right here to my profile and you can click on here. We have a wonderful community of traders. We're all working together as a unit, and we do a great job, helping each other out, finding some wonderful setups. It is truly a team effort. Thanks, guys. Have a great weekend.